Hey everyone, it's Sleepy Vlog number 53. I went back and did the math because I did a bunch of vlogs where I numbered them going forward, and then I did a vlog countdown. But all total I did 53 vlogs in the past. Everything I do really on YouTube is a vlog, but what I call a vlog here and what I think some other people do is where you ramble on a couple of different subjects that are on your mind, as opposed to comic book reviews or hauls or whatever. But it's all freeform, you know. But so I have a bunch of different things I have on my mind that I have been wanting to talk about with y'all. Kind of a follow-up on my comic book thoughts. I got a chance to read this Hawkeye, the one with the essentially with a kid's cartoon inside of it, with my daughter, Quacking Duck, Beatrix. And first time we started reading it, she was kind of interested, and then along came this bad guy, Mr. Sun, and suddenly she lost interest and said, I want to stop reading this. The Sun being the bad guy didn't really make sense to her. But then later we picked it up and she was interested again, and we looked at it. She really liked the stuff of the brother dog licking all the time and saying brother, brother, brother. And she liked it when the dingoes showed up, who are the bros, and they say dog instead of bro all the time. So she was enjoying it pretty well. I think she was a little suspicious of it, like that there was something a little wrong with it in her mind. And then it just has different people appearing, coming to help the Hawkeye dog character named Steve. And then it just whites out. And then there's a little epilogue with Steve at back at the headquarters not wanting to join in on the party, and then it whites out again, and we go to Clint Barton, Hawkeye, fast asleep. And she was really upset. She was like, they didn't finish the story. So I was sort of the silver lining of the cloud of this issue for me was that my daughter would enjoy it. And she did partially enjoy it, but it kind of, and she'll accept some pretty lame endings to stories from my point of view. Like in Little Red Sonja. I haven't got to talk with you guys about that. But that was a very silly, very childish story, but it had an end. It finished what it promised to finish. And this didn't do that, which is kind of symbolic to me of where Hawkeye has gone. So I just wanted to throw that in. A thing that was on my mind for a while after I listened to a podcast by Kevin Smith, the film director who does Fat Man on Batman, was an episode where he interviewed an author who'd written a book about Bill Finger, who is the probably co-creator of Batman and creator of most of the early things in his mythos, but not everything. Jerry Robinson did a lot too. And Bob Kane, the official creator, may have done some stuff. This author on this podcast acted as if it was absolute proof that proved that Bob Kane had done zero and Bill Finger had done everything. The very least, Bob Kane drew the first few strips of Batman, right? But anyway, so I wanted more proof because he just made these statements as if they were fact. And it seems to me that kind of thing probably, there needs to be a record for you to say that. So I went to the library and got his book. Unfortunately, when I got the book, it's a children's book. A pretty nice children's book, although how many children are interested in disputes on who is the real creator of something? There's a picture of supposedly what Bob Kane's original Batman looked like before Bill Finger told him exactly how to do it, although Bill Finger did not draw it. But he threw in ideas, and he was a friend of Bob Kane, and they had already done some work together under Bob Kane's name, where Bill Finger wrote the scripts. And I think it was quite common back then for one person to kind of own the shop and get all the credit, and other people worked for them. And this may be why Bill Finger, during most of his career, did not complain about this. But I also wonder, since we haven't been there and this author doesn't cite any evidence, what really went on? I mean, if you have two people kind of, brainstorming together, which apparently is what, Bob Kane went over to Bill Finger's house when he was having trouble coming up with his Batman idea, which he had to do over a weekend. If you have two people brainstorming together, it's often hard to tell exactly where all the ideas come from. And they evolve and bounce off of each other. So I guess despite the fact that he got all the money and all the fame, I end up having a little sympathy for Bob Kane posthumously with this idea that he did nothing. Now, notoriously, he was kind of a lazy guy and very egotistical. So I think, again, as for those of us who take interest in the history of comics, we constantly bump up against this question of who really did what, who deserves credit, who deserves money. It seems like Bob Kane should have shared some of the money with Bill Finger, at least. Now, the author of this made it out to be this huge shame and scandal, but I think in the comic book world, Bill Finger's given a lot of credit. And I think that his heirs are given some royalties for the reprints of things that are credited to him. Just internally from some stuff that this author, Mark Tyler Nobleman, mentioned in the podcast. Still, and it's not DC's fault in this case, because they had a contract with a creator that said that creator had the right to always have his name on it as the creator. Sounds like a fair deal to a creator. He became a millionaire when the TV show came out, and no doubt got even more money when the movies started popping up, starting with the first Tim Burton movie. It is kind of instructive in general, to think there were all these, small group of writers in the early days of DC who created a huge number of tropes that everyone else has built their careers on. And most of them rarely get credit at the beginning of the book, other than Bob Kane and a few other people. And I wonder if in a just world, the comic book companies should put a credit for every DC and Marvel character on every issue. I mean, we just get credits for a few random things, like Batman and Superman, I guess, now. But there's lots of other things. And I guess Bill Finger helped create a number of other Golden Age characters. And he was writing for DC up through the 60s, when DC fired all their writers or stopped giving them work because they were asking for health insurance. And then they hired a bunch of young new writers like Denny O'Neil. And I've also been reading this alter ego that's all about Denny O'Neil. I haven't gotten through to the end yet, just been reading about the early days. And it also brought up interesting stuff about creators and who did what. Because with Denny O'Neil, people tend to give him a lot of credit for his work, but how much, if you listen to Neil Adams, it was mostly Neil Adams' ideas on all these things that they did together. Denny O'Neil himself, when he's describing the work he did on Batlash was plotted by Sergio Aragonés. Batlash was an old, I think, DC Western. It was plotted by Sergio Aragonés, who drew every panel in sketch form and then handed it over to the artist. The artist drew it up in a more finished form, and then Denny O'Neil came along and did the script. Denny O'Neil did some early Doctor Strange scripts, but those were mostly done by Steve Ditko, and then the scripter came in afterwards and just filled in the word balloons. And Denny O'Neil doesn't try to hide any of this, and this is the way it worked. And the writers were editors; they were people who worked in the office for the most part, and with the Marvel method and everything. And so they were, in a sense, closer to the tap of credit. That like it used to be that the editor's name, Stan Lee, edited by Stan Lee, edited by Roy Thomas, then the writer, then the artist. Anyway, I think we'll never know completely. And it's fun to still try to parse it out in different places. It seems like, just from the little bit I read here, that Steve Ditko may... I need to give Steve Ditko more credit, that he may have done a huge amount. And I was looking at some old Doctor Stranges, and it does say Steve Ditko plot. So really, in that case of an artist doing everything but putting the dialogue on afterwards, the writer, in a way, is like a script doctor or something, almost. Maybe a little more than that. Speaking of Steve Ditko, I've backed a few Kickstarters. For the first time, comic book Kickstarters. I've backed a Kickstarter or two of science fiction writers who were friends of mine in the past. But one of the Kickstarters is, this isn't the finished product, but it's a Steve Ditko comic book, where they were only trying to raise $2,000, and I think they raised that, but not much more. And it's going to be published by Robin Snyder and Steve Ditko, who have been, I think, for the past 10 or more years, publishing Ditko's stuff in these black and white editions. And it's, I guess I understand kind of why it happens, that Steve Ditko's marginalized himself so much, but it just still kind of boggled my mind that even the lousiest Steve Ditko project, is just raising $2,000. I haven't gone back to check to see how much they raised in total. But anyway, I like to think he's happy doing whatever he is doing, and doesn't need the fame and money, because it almost seems like he's avoiding it on purpose. I think it's a woman, Robin Snyder, who lives on the West Coast. I thought Steve Ditko still lived in New York, but one of the prizes is to have her sign it. I don't know if she takes on a partial writing role, helps him with the scripts. I haven't seen credit for her on that in any of the ones I do have. But it really excited me to be able to back Steve Ditko. It just seemed cool to me. And so I think I'm paying $10 just to get a comic book by him, which will probably be black and white and about 32 pages. So it's not the greatest deal in the world, but it's probably also something that not many people will have. And I could have paid more for a few extras, but none of the extras really appealed to me too much. Then the other thing I backed was a sketchbook by who's the guy? Steve Rude, one of my favorite artists from the 80s. I mean, he's not just from the 80s, but that's sort of when I think of Steve Rude, I think of 80s comics. Nexus in particular. So every year he does a sketchbook. He prints up a number of copies. I'm not sure how many copies of a sketchbook, and he raises funds for it on Kickstarter. And there, for $25, I think I'm getting the sketchbook, some other little extra book, and 3 or 4 prints. Now, maybe when I get these things, I'll see why $25 got me all of that they're very chintzy or cheap. But on the face of it, it seemed like extravagant, a lot to give away for $25. And I kind of wonder how that works out for Steve Rude economically. I heard that a lot of people have trouble meeting their fulfillment when they run into postage costs and things like that on Kickstarter. And so I'm happy to pay what I think is a good amount on Kickstarter. I don't really want to give people free money on Kickstarter unless they are some amazing charity or something. But I'm certainly happy to back Steve Rude for a quality sketchbook of his, sort of an album of his sketches for $25, and that he's throwing in all this other stuff. I hope that works out okay for him. So, I heard another podcast, this time Word Balloon, with, I can't remember his name, a pretty well-known creator who's British but lives in America now, who's done some kickstarting for Fairy Quest with Ramos, and talking about how difficult it is and how financially tricky it is to do it if you don't get your numbers right and everything. So that just sort of emphasized in my mind what a good deal the Steve Rude thing was. But it looks like he's done this other years, so hopefully he knows what he's doing. He also was not trying to raise a huge amount of money, because you see other people raising $20,000, $30,000, $60,000. I think Steve Rude raised $15,000. And Steve Ditko, one of the gods of modern comics, really, of the world of modern comics that we know now, god-like creators of the American comic scene, was just hoping to raise $2,000. No, he wasn't. As I said, it was just a small black and white comic book, but still, it just surprised me. Some other stuff that's been on my thoughts. I saw a video by Gary, one of the several Garys, Mongo Stomp Time. He hadn't been on in quite a while, and he'd run into some financial hard times and hasn't been buying comic books. But he mentioned how he used to buy a huge number of comic books, partially so he could show them off on YouTube. And I wondered, do I do that? And I don't think I do. I think that YouTube and this community has opened up a demon inside of me, or a deep well of hunger, watching everybody show their comics, and that has reminded me, there were these comic books that I thought someday I would get, and these comics I always wanted, and this thing I always wanted, and I've started buying a lot more because I've sort of opened up my mind to all that I wanted, rather than putting it on the back burner and saying someday I'll get it. There's still a lot that someday I'll get. And part of that's my age. I'm realizing that this comic book thing's not going to go away, and that I can now afford to indulge myself, at least up to a point. I've been going pretty crazy on in-stock trades, along with, I've had all these hauls of pretty cheap comic stuff from 50-cent bins and stuff. But also I've been going a bit crazy on in-stock trades. I don't think I have any of them right here, and I have some more coming in the mail. But, I got some more Will Eisner, some Marvel Masterworks. I even got the Best of Vampirilla, or have that coming in, the Best of Vampirilla from the Warren years. Because that's something I always wanted to get when I was a kid, but somehow was a little afraid to buy Vampirilla comics then. Maybe I just felt they were they were too sexy on the cover, and that my dad would throw them away immediately. But yeah, YouTube does feed something here. And, like my craving to get all these magazines about old comic book creators and stuff has kind of been unleashed. I've gone through phases like that before, actually, of getting magazines like this, just not in a long time. But now I'm doing a lot of that again, which I'm also getting. I'm getting some of these from In-Stock Trade and some of them directly from the publisher. So there's kind of a feeding frenzy of my interests going on, and I do keep up with all the new comics I read, but I have a huge backlog of the older stuff that I've been piling up to read for about 2 years now. There's tons of back stuff from the 80s and 90s and 70s and even a little bit of 60s that I've been picking up that I haven't gotten around to reading yet. Don't buy comic books just to show them off on YouTube. I mean, that's just a passing moment. You can pick up one comic book and talk about it is just as good as picking up 20 and talking about them, as far as I'm concerned. You can talk about comic books, really old comic books, if you're not buying new comic books. It doesn't really matter. And there was a week or two where I caught myself like feeling, I should hurry up and read my weekly comic books really fast so that I can put up a review about it. And I think that that's also a place not to go to, because eventually you'll just stop because you're not enjoying it anymore. So better just to do it in your own time, put your videos up when you want, about what you want, and leave it at that. There's no responsibility, because there's no reward here other than speaking your mind or possibly making some friends. So I'm just doing it on my own time and putting them up when I can. But I do kind of really want to talk about everything, which is funny. I think after 40 years or something of doing this in solitude, it's kind of an explosion still. I've kind of wondered if it makes sense to prune the backlog of my videos. There are some that I just look back on and they seem unwatchable. I want to leave up a good number of what I've done in the past, but part of me thinks, just leave it all up. But another part of me thinks you could prune out maybe 10% that's just not worth anyone's while. And I've also been thinking about, I comment on a lot of videos when I can, and I often can. And some people's videos I'm commenting on, and they never comment back. And I've started to think, well, maybe I should focus more on the people who comment back. And then I worried, maybe there are some people who comment a lot on my videos who I've neglected to comment on theirs. There's certain patterns that I follow in my day and my week. And so when people's videos come out, make it more likely or less likely that I'll comment on their videos. There's a few people's videos that I always seem to end up watching or listening to late at night just before I go to sleep, and I'm too sleepy to leave a comment, for instance. It's actually the videos I listen to while I'm at work that I can quickly, because I have a keyboard right there, I can quickly just take a micro break from my actual work, quickly type up a sentence or two and leave them a comment. So it's actually the videos I watch at work that I comment on the most, ironically. And there's been this conversation out there that I was already a part of about digital comics and the Marvel app, and will Marvel go all digital? And Spiro.com predicted that in 5 years Marvel will be all digital. And he may have been saying that for shock value, or he may totally predict that that's going to happen. And, my first reaction was, no, it can't be in 5 years. Don't let it happen that quickly. I was kind of thinking of all the evidence after Spiro said that, so I'm kind of going to momentarily take the paranoid view and just argue that Marvel is, and we know they have their multinational Disney company as their master, and there's all kinds of directives and long-term plans that come down from Disney. Like, they've made all of their, not all, but a huge number of their books cosmic books in advance of the Guardians of the Galaxy. And I think that the executives up high are probably saying, we think Guardians of the Galaxy is going to be a huge hit. And when it comes out and is big and people go looking for cosmic Marvel comics, we want to have a lot of cosmic Marvel trades out there. And that's why we, the monthly and weekly readers, have been seeing this stuff for a long time, so they build up a stock of modern cosmic trades to be out for when the movie is. And that's kind of seeing, this is, again, playing in devil's advocate or whatever, so I don't know if this is really true, but I'm just reading the tea leaves in this paranoid way, that so much of what Marvel does is part of larger master plans by their corporate masters. And this, to me, would explain why they've stuck with the digital codes for so long. When they first started doing most of their books at $4 a book, they were putting the digital code, and it made it seem like you were getting something extra for your dollar. And I figured after 6 months or a year, they would stop putting the codes on because they want to sell people digital comics. But they've just kept doing it and kept doing it. And we see that we all, or those of us who are interested in it, give codes to our friends, and our friends give us codes, so we don't have to buy the comic books. It doesn't seem like a good plan in the long run. And I can buy comic books out of the dollar bin and have a code on it that otherwise would have, on Comixology still cost $4. Or, you can buy this Hulk, and your friend who likes digital comics doesn't have to spend $4 on it, or you could each spend $2. Usually you can't sell them. People try, but I don't think very many people succeed. But, and still keep in mind, I'm being as paranoid as possible. And they keep doing this AR thing, which I can't believe they have a lot of. If they look at their stats, very many of the buyers of the magazines are looking at very many of the ARs. But they keep pushing it. They keep it in there. And now they've doubled up on it by making the ARs really easy to access in the Marvel Unlimited app. And they may see this, the big planners at the corporate level, as part of a long-term plan to make digital, both of these things, to make digital more a part of people's reading habits. And then Marvel is now kind of infamous for using the cheapest paper, the cheapest ink. Excuse me. So there's going to be a real crude edit here. I've never edited a video in any way, so if I make this work. Anyway, I was talking about Marvel. So they're using the cheapest materials at the highest prices they can get. I kind of imagine, again in this paranoid mode, the top executives saying, this market's going to be dead later. Let's squeeze as much of it as we can, as much money out of it as we can now. Scorched earth. Take the money and run. And meanwhile, we'll use that money and resources to build up the next empire. And there's the whole idea of disruption in business now with high tech and everything. You expect to disrupt an old business with a new business. So that's probably what the young executives are being taught these days. Meanwhile, we'll build up this digital empire in the background, get people used to it on really cheap prices, and in the long term, we'll have our own means of distribution. We will have a direct feed to our audience for promoting our movies, and there'll be this synergy between our comics and our movies. And so that's how I can imagine kind of that 5-year scenario maybe working out. They're probably looking to the wider audience eventually being the audience for the Marvel apps and stuff, and that the current, fanatical collectors, as they probably see us at the comic book shops, as being a marginal small part of that. Now, that's imagining they have a really clear vision, and a vision that fits this paranoid mold. And I have to say, because I work at a high-tech firm, and every year or two we totally commit to some new idea and think that's the way we're going to make all our money. And then later we totally commit to something else. So these plans can change on a dime, even though it seems like total commitment. But following this paranoid thinking, if you're looking for a hero of physical, I'd say look at Image Comics. They do digital, and they're selling their own DRM-free digital now. But they also give a lot of value. They almost attract people to the physical by the incredible value they give on their trade prices, the really nice quality of the package of the product, along with the good quality of the material on the inside. They are not bottom feeding on the habits and desires of collectors. They are trying to expand the universe, so to speak, of the comic book world, and not just putting out the 1,000th different version of Batman or of the X-Men, but looking for new fertile grounds. And so if they do really well, then, in this paranoid view, then that's what would make someone give some corporation like Marvel or DC some inspiration, so to speak, to keep pursuing the physical market. Now, what I kind of picture the digital in my own mind as becoming a place for trying things out, for casual readers, for attracting new readers, for allowing creators without huge resources of publishing companies to try riskier projects and put them out digitally and see if they hit, and then if they do, then start producing the physical. Because there's one reason why Marvel and DC have, with the kind of up and down tides of the comic book market, have been the ones who survived, is it takes a lot of money to publish physical comics. It takes a deep pocket. You have to take a lot of financial risks. And so the lessening of financial risks for creators doing digital, I think, could ultimately enrich comics digitally and physically. Marvel could become... The more Marvel is led digitally, I think the more they could become kind of this thing where they're more and more aimed at the movie audience and less aimed at an audience with a richer interest in comics. And you could argue they already are that, but it could be a lot worse. It could be very media-driven, very multimedia-driven, with the app making plenty of money, but still being this kind of small cog in the bigger media machine. So I think there's that kind of added danger of going all digital. Not just, people have talked about the format, and that some of the art form of the layouts of pages, and certainly the 2-page spreads like this would just go away. But there are new formats and interesting things to explore there, so it wouldn't be like the end of art. But I'm more worried. I'm even more worried because I do like the art of the flat page, but I'm even more worried about content in a Marvel-driven app where they have a lock on distribution. Then they start feeling that they have a lock on content in a way. So I would worry that I'm not explaining it very well, but I'm worried that they would close down the content to fit whatever they thought their very strict commercial needs were at the time, based on what cartoons and movies are popular, and what long-term marketing plans they have. So yeah, or another thing to support would be things like Afterlife with Archie, which is a really beautiful physical comic book with even this just really cool feeling paper that doesn't feel like any other paper. And it's just not going to have the same effect as digital. And I think this is a pretty big hit, in terms of a smaller publisher like Archie. So, paranoid stuff aside, I'm pretty sure that Marvel might be trying to push for all digital, but I think in the end they will strike a balance, and the whole comic book publishing will strike a balance. But we can certainly contribute by supporting what we see as the quality physical comics. Okay, I've gone on and on and on. Thanks for listening. Talk to you later.